Hello, friends of Studio Brûlé. This is Steve Brûlé, and it is coffee time. I got a little bit delayed on some things here today, a little carryings on outside the apartment, so a little late getting started. But this is a session where I go over some informal things that come across my desk. And welcome to the regulars in the stream here. Today we're talking about Antifa wet dreams. As you saw, there was a nude protester in Portland that got all the news people all excited and worked up about this sort of powerful woman. Well, let's have a look at it today. As you can see, I have my VIP club membership of the patriarchy, which authorizes me to comment on all the evil comings and goings of the evil feminist empire that stretches its thousands of tentacles all the way around the world in thousands upon thousands of well-funded feminist organizations. Let's have a look at this article or this event, reading from the top with me here. Oh, welcome Michael and Barry and Gin Bottle and some of the regulars out there. I'll get into this a little bit later. I'll tell you right now, Michael, okay, the patriarchy cards, $10 contribution to Studio Brûlé through PayPal, and put for the patriarchy card in the description. And also if you can remind me at patriarchyhome@gmail.com. If you don't get your card, send me an email there. Okay, let's read this article right from the top here, this headline: out of Portland tear gas, an apparition emerges, capturing the imagination of protesters. And even more, capturing the imagination of this writer who's gushing about this woman. Reading the subtitle here: an unidentified woman wearing only a face mask and a cap sits in a Portland, Oregon street early Saturday morning, facing law enforcement officers who held back protesters. And of course, we're supposed to read into this that this is an incredibly courageous and powerful woman, facing down the armies of the world with nothing more than her naked hoochoo. Let's read something from the article here. Portland, Oregon. She emerged as an apparition from clouds of tear gas as federal agents fired pepper balls at angry protesters in the early Saturday darkness. Just bear with me. I forgot to open one file here. Going to get it open now. Oopsie. Okay, so letter, what the heck are we at here? Okay, here we go. Here is some more stuff from the article. Right away, they're appealing to sort of theatrical movie style imagery. This woman materializing out of this tear gas fog as if it's some kind of miracle. Here we go again. A woman wearing nothing but a black mask and a stocking cap strode toward a dozen heavily armed agents attired in camouflage fatigues lined up across a downtown Portland street. Oh, the courage it must take to do that, for an exhibitionist to take off her clothes. Reading onwards. Agents dispatched by the Trump administration after vociferous objections of state and city officials are part of a force that has fired projectiles at and detained activists protesting nightly since the killing of George Floyd by Minneapolis police May 25th. Yeah. Now here they're pitting it as if woman is facing down these armies sent by the evil Trump. At least this particular author is. Reading from the top. Numerous photos and videos posted on Twitter show the unidentified woman as she halted in the middle of the street at about 1:45 a.m. She stood calmly, a surreal image of human vulnerability in the face of an overpowering force that has been criticized nationally by civil rights advocates. peaceful protesters is right. Peaceful protesters who were also seen trying to break into various government buildings and federal buildings, who are looting and breaking windows and beating people up. Those are their peaceful protesters. And listen to the tone of this article. Surreal image. She stood calmly. It's a surreal image of human vulnerability in the face of an overpowering force. The agents in gas masks and helmets continued firing pepper balls in a staccato pop, pop, pop heard on video, aiming low at the asphalt where puffs of smoke mingled with clouds of gas. At one point, a fellow protester clothed, carrying a homemade shield, darted in front of the woman, angling to protect her. The poor woman was out there, vulnerable to an army with nothing but a face mask to protect her. The apparition she is. And reading from the top, but the woman sidestepped him. He jumped out of the way, perhaps realizing that he made them both a target. Before it was over, she struck ballet poses and reclined on the street. She also sat on the asphalt in a yoga-like position facing officers before they left. The woman making her statement Saturday was altogether uninhibited. At one point, standing on one leg and raising her arms in an arc-type motion. He describes this with great detail and relish. As she struck ballet poses, a patrol car arrived and a dozen officers in blue uniforms replaced the line of agents, whom officials described as having been targeted by protesters throwing rocks, bottles, and pieces of metal. She sat in the street facing them, legs spread in the headlights' glare. That doesn't sound anything like an exhibitionist, does it? Later, she rolled on her back in a graceful pose, then stood again. The second group of officers, who may have been either Portland police or federal agents, also left. Images of her on social media harked back to a previous iconic but clothed images juxtaposing force and vulnerability, such as the 1967 photo of a Vietnam War protester who faced a line of U.S. troops and placed a carnation into the barrel of a soldier's rifle. Yeah, she's all that, isn't she? We're going to see another article who puts a more accurate spin on this exact same incident. This fellow here, though, is all enamored. He's fallen in love with this apparition, he describes. Ultimate act of defiance broadcast worldwide. A man stood in front of a column of tanks leaving, this is the other incident he thinks it harkens back to. A man stood in front of a column of tanks leaving Beijing's Tiananmen Square on June 5th, 1989, a day after the Chinese military had suppressed protests by force. He's trying to liken this to that. A woman who, knowing full well that she's under absolutely no danger at all, and he's comparing it to another man who stood in front of the Chinese military the day after the slaughter. The Chinese, known to slaughter their own people and had just slaughtered people in Tiananmen Square, that was a man of courage who stood in front of tanks with a real, almost, I would say, he had to expect that he too would be slaughtered. She knew full well, in a gynocentric culture dominated by feminists in the West, that she is under absolutely zero risk by strutting about in front like that. But we'll get more to that later. Nudity has also served as a form of protest since at least the 11th century, when legends hold that Lady Godiva rode naked, veiled only by her long hair, in a horse through Coventry, England, to protest oppressive taxation. What exactly are they protesting in Portland, huh? We know what they're protesting. They're protesting the fact that they might have to work for a living if they don't get socialism enacted in the U.S. And their looting will be over. Now this article has placed all theatric and poetic themes all around this woman's strutting about naked, and has drawn parallels to some legitimately brave actions and even legends like Lady Godiva. And it even gets worse in social media. Here on Twitter, sympathetic commentators were quick to conclude that, quote, naked Athena, as they dubbed the Portland protester, caused the officers to turn tail. They did nothing of the like, of course. Let's read on. The right-wing National Review website gave the incident its own spin, stating, Antifa psychopath loses her mind, strips naked to protest Portland police. Well, I don't buy any of those interpretations. What we have here is a woman who probably loves stripping down. She's probably an exhibitionist, and she sees that she could gain both attention and praise and all kinds of wonderful stuff with absolutely no risk to herself by simply stripping down and walking out and putting her hoo-hoo in the front of the glaring lights of the police trucks or police cars. And she did. So let's have a look a little bit further, some more photos of this before we get into another article here. Here she is. Now, it does take a special kind of exhibitionism, I think, to sit there and spread your legs in front of police officers in the glaring lights in the middle of the street. Now, this is the photo that the photographer and the author of that news report chose to represent this incident. Notice the halo-ish lighting around her, and the lighting and the glowing of her and the orangey skin tones all edited up to perfection and framed to perfection with this ominous force in the background, and the light is a continuous, almost the glow of a surreal lighting for sure. The photographer, and having taken a lot of photos myself, you have to work very hard to get this effect. It doesn't just pop out at you like that by pointing your camera. Here are some other scenes here. This one calls Naked Athena Banishes Police Officers. This is how the left are trying to portray this incident, of course. And here again, Naked Athena, all using this very theatric photo here. They're comparing her to Athena. So who is Athena? Athena, of course, is the goddess of war, female counterpart of Ares. She was the daughter of Zeus. No mother bore her. So she's born from Zeus himself with no mother. She sprang from Zeus's head, full grown and clothed in armor, apparently not naked. She was Zeus's favorite child. According to Homer's account in the Iliad, Athena was a fierce and ruthless warrior. Now, here are some alternate pictures taken. And then, of course, the caption here on this Twitter cap, these cops got so confused that they actually left. What sorcery is this? Naked Athena in Portland. Now, notice the distinctly not so glamorous photo lighting here, nor not so glamorous editing, nor cropping. Here she is again in the photo that's been made popular. This is the larger crop, possibly cut out so not to have the crack of her butt here, which is not the most flattering. But here it is in a more normal photograph that might come out of the camera. Also, not portraying her like some kind of a goddess of war. And it gets worse. There's the other angle of the photograph. There she is looking more like a mannequin squashed into the street. Kind of humiliating looking, really. And again, looking like an exhibitionist just out there showing off her body, much like a 5-year-old girl will do at a party of adults if she's not getting the attention. Strip off the clothes and strut in and say, ta-da, here I am, look at me. And here's the fella acting as White Knight here. Wants his part of the action. Notice that in spite of this being the sort of BLM-inspired Antifa protests, it's virtually all white people doing this theatrics. And here's the only picture I could find that might reveal her face. But there she is. So let's have a look at, oh, these are some more pictures. The stripping down to nudity in the West is not a brave act. In fact, women in particular are so protected, they know darn well that no one's going to dare having themselves caught opposing a woman who strips down in public. These are the kinds of theatrical victim mongering stuff that feminists have been doing forever. Here's one pretending as if women are victimized here, hanging herself up on a monument as if women are oppressed in our society. And this is what happens in cultures, non-Western cultures. In Russia, for instance, try to have a female group strip down their boobs up to disrupt the public in Russia, and they're treated like a man would be treated. But in the West, they know they won't be. Here they are showing, this is a PETA group. These photos illustrate that there's nothing that I think these kinds of activists and attention monger women love more than taking their clothes off. Every and any cause is an excuse to take your clothes off and spread in public. And the reason is, it's not because it's brave. It's not brave at all. In fact, they all know full well that taking their clothes off is going to protect them. This is what happens again in Russia. You'll be hauled away unceremoniously. But this is what happens in Argentina, where feminists regularly strip their clothes off and do these bizarre demonstrations, screaming as if they're so hard done by, in an ultra-feminist country like Argentina, in which the men are so browbeaten, I think they're afraid to open their mouths. Again, Argentina. What is it about feminism that turns women insane? They consider this a protest for some reason. Okay, so let's get on to another article, which I think more accurately. Okay, first of all, here's a few headlines of how they try to worship or create some kind of legendary hero from this woman's actions, and comparing her to other legends of history here. In the LA Times, letters to the editor. Portland's naked Athena is the hero our wounded country needs now. Hero. Here in the Sun, bravery in the buff. Who is naked Athena, the nude Portland protester who confronted police? This is just July 21st, a couple of days ago. And in the New York Post, protester dubbed naked Athena faces off with Portland police. There's only in the West would they call such a thing bravery when there's absolutely no risk involved. All hail our new queen, Portland protester, naked Athena. This is 3 days ago. There's all these left-wing headlines. Trevor Noah explains how Portland's naked protester and an army of angry mums stood up to Donald Trump's secret police. Donald Trump's secret police. Just look at the imagery they're trying to draw onto this little event. Here is a spoiled, protected woman in a gynocentric culture stripping down and exhibitioning herself, knowing full well she's at zero risk and will be celebrated as a hero for doing it. And they're vilifying Donald Trump and somehow claiming that Donald Trump had secret police out there, and this naked woman bravely faced them down and they shrunk away. What a lying narrative that is. And here in The Spectator, LA Times thirsts after naked Athena. And this guy is referring back to the LA Times article headline that we just read. Now this guy actually gets down to the nitty-gritty of this event here. And the subtitle here, it's getting hot under Richard Reed's face mask. Indeed it is. Richard Reed is the guy that wrote that first article we went over that was glorifying this woman and put the surreal imagery up around it. So let's read what this fellow has to say about Richard Reed's article. Let me just get a sip of my coffee before I get started. Reading from the top. Reed's article is ostensibly about protests in Portland and the Trump administration's attempts to suppress them through the use of federal agents. As he writes about the naked activist who so entranced social media this weekend, though things get a bit uncomfortable. The woman making her statement Saturday was altogether uninhibited, Reid declares, getting right to the meat of his story, quote, at one point standing on one leg and raising her arms in an arc-type motion. Richard, how closely were you watching her? This fellow points out. And reading onwards, the woman making her statement Saturday was altogether uninhibited, Reid declares, getting right to the meat of his story, at one point standing on one leg, raising her arms. I think I read that. How closely watching? Yeah, I did. I should have cut that out. Later, she rolled on her back in a graceful pose, then stood again. Was this man taking copious notes, or has he been watching a video on repeat? The latter, I think, is closer to the truth. Oh, I just read through that same. We read through this one already as a duplicate screen cap. Reading from the top. Reid's piece climaxes with the implicit comparison of this nude woman to Tank Man, the Chinese gentleman who stepped in front of a column of tanks in the aftermath of the Tiananmen Square massacre. You might think the latter contained more powerful symbolism because, if nothing else, it followed a massacre. Somehow, though, admirers of naked Athena cannot see the wood for the trees, or perhaps the trees for their wood. You write on here in this article, no one can deny that a slim woman in nude makes for effective propaganda for a radical cause. No one would remember Femin, which was ubiquitous in the mid-2010s, if its bare-breasted activists had not been beautiful. Even then, though, reporters gave the sense of holding it together and not holding something else. Of course, Coburn is being very mean. We know that Mr. Reid has no intention of being lascivious, but seeming so is a consequence of reporters desperately trying to elevate passing curiosities to iconic status. If this woman comes to be as memorable as Tank Man, Coburn will personally strip naked and dance in Portland. I must have skipped out on one quote there. Meanwhile, the activists themselves are debating whether Naked Athena is an example of white privilege. Naked Athena can kiss my ass, posts one. Quote, all the black girls twerking in front of cops, laughing at them, were hood rats, ghetto, and doing too much. Now one random white woman does yoga naked once, and y'all eat it up. Mess. Well, he's got a point there. At least some of these people aren't fooled by the nonsense of this. And so this summarizes this up. If you look at this photo, let's get back to the photo of the woman at the front here. Whoopsie, went a little bit too far. Here she is. This photo to some people is a surreal, powerful image of a vulnerable woman facing down the military, but not to me. This is an entitled woman knowing full well of her privilege, knowing full well that many other people in any other culture in different circumstances would be hauled off, probably roughly, if not beaten, in no uncertain terms, and she'd be ridiculed through the culture. But in our culture, no. This is a pure example, purely demonstrating this woman's full knowledge that she is perfectly safe, privileged, entitled, that nothing possibly but praise can come and compassion will ever come her way for doing this. This also, look at her spreading her legs to the officers. This really brings to mind to me that women, especially these kinds of feminists, believe themselves to be gods. They truly do. Because babies come out of their hoochie, they believe that they are the gods creating these babies. This is really, and they also believe that therefore they must be obeyed and even worshipped. This feminist culture with these kinds of imageries they are revealing themselves they think themselves to be gods that need to be worshipped for the capacities of popping out a baby. They seem to be utterly completely unaware of the fact that they did not create their bodies. They were born that way. They are no more responsible. They are no more responsible for producing babies than they are for producing trees, or that we are for worms growing in the ground. These things happen to us. Women do not create babies. Their bodies have evolved to do that without any effort on their part other than lying down and spreading their legs. But this is the confusion in the minds of feminists. They think that this automatic biological function entitles them to be treated as gods. And that is a mental illness. It's a cultural illness. And it's been supported by the gynocentrism of the West for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it's far overdue that we eliminate that. We start to treat women as equal human beings, and get rid of all of gynocentrism, get rid of the pussy pass once and for all, not one bit of pussy pass. You should expect, as a woman, if you go about breaking the law, you should be treated like anybody in the culture, anybody in the country for breaking law. You should be hauled off and cuffed. And if you choose to do that in the buff, if there's a law against it, then you should be charged with that too. The only reason this got this kind of attention is because of the pre-existing gynocentrism of our culture, and the fact that feminists and all of these activists here take advantage of their privilege. So that's all I have prepared for you for today. And tomorrow I'm going to be talking about, oh geez, I forget the topic now right off the top of my head. I should write these things down. But we're going to be talking about the erasing of whiteness and what they're up to about that. And there's also an update on the coronavirus that I'll get to possibly later today or on Saturday. So thank you for joining me, folks, for this coffee session, and I hope you can join me for the next one. Tomorrow's is already scheduled. I think it's for 11 a.m. So we'll hope to see you then. And until then, as I like to point out, enjoy every day. Do something you love every single day. In spite of being surrounded and by enemies, by people who hate us in our culture and seek to destroy us, we should still do something you love every single day, such that at the end of your life, you feel contented and fulfilled. So I hope you join me again with the next coffee session with Steve.